Our town is not quite ordinary. It is a little creepy. There are a lot of tales and legends. If you listen to the locals, HYOH is hidden in every corner. I myself also found myself in incomprehensible stories several times. They will be written about below. Well, in general, you really feel some kind of oppressive atmosphere. In summer, 2/3 of the days the weather is cloudy, but the sea is close. Half of the buildings in the city are identical, grey, 5-story boxes. There is a chemical plant that releases a ton of wonderful substances that are beneficial for the body into the river, from which we drink the water. In general, for such a decadent freak like me, it even delivers. This will be a long thread. I have a lot of stories, some of which I wrote down in my diary when I was still in Soznitsa. Some are quite interesting, some are terribly banal and unoriginal. I will try to somehow intersperse them with each other, so that overall, I get an average level, and I will also describe cool stories that I myself witnessed. The green ball. We have to start somewhere. I will start with a real incident that happened 7 or 8 years ago, when I was still a studio student. 3 boys from the 9th grade of our secondary school, number 3, went into the forest. I don't know what they were doing there. Maybe they were drinking. Maybe they were just walking. The point is that only 2 people returned from the forest, crazy and crap. They led the cops into a clearing in the forest, and there, the corpse of their third comrade was lying. Well, like a corpse, a completely burnt body with a black crust, only white teeth showing. The cops went crazy too. The school children said that they were sitting here in the clearing, not bothering anyone, and then a green ball, about the size of a laptop ball, flew out from the forest. It flew silently, about a meter above the ground. The boys noticed it, but they were not particularly scared. They didn't even approach the ball. The ball flew about 200 meters from them, sometimes changing direction and flight altitude, but the size and color did not change. Then, one of the school children, that same burnt idiot, for some reason whistled. Well, like calling an animal, the ball exploded from its place, and literally in 2 to 3 seconds, flew straight into this fucker at such a good speed. The boy instantly caught fire, and both sat and fell down, without even shouting anything. Fucked up by this turn of events, their friends got up and moved on. That is it. They also said that during the autopsy, it turned out that all the blood inside the boy was either caked or turned into jelly, which is apparently what happens with short-term exposure to extremely high temperatures. Although, maybe they are already fantasizing about it. But the fact that the boy really died is true. Yes, by the way, they say that there was no rain that day, although it seems like ball lightning can appear even in clear weather. Forest belt. The forest belt behind the vacant lot, which I mentioned in the OP post, is a separate issue. They say that in Niponia, there is a forest of suicides, so this is bullshit. In our forest, 1 or 2 people hang themselves every year. It seems that there were no barren years in my memory. All sorts of young idiots who were abandoned by a girl or who did not pass the Unified State exam, drunks, homeless people, and normal people too. And for some reason, everything is exactly in this fucking part of the city. It would seem that the city is surrounded on 3 sides by forest. I don't want to hang myself anywhere, but no. Everyone runs into this wasteland, reaches the edge, and there they pull themselves into a noose. My neighbor on the right, during a joint smoke break in the entrance, even once told me a fucking story about how he and his brother watched directly from the balcony as the cops at the edge of the forest removed another self-cutting loser from a branch. The distance there is decent. They only had 1 binocular, and they literally snatched it out of each other's hands. Grandmothers, and not only them, believe that the forest is cursed with bad energy. Well, they would not think so. About energy, I don't know. I sometimes walk through those places. The forest is like a forest. The sun is shining. The birds are singing. Grass, moss. No feeling of cosmic transcendental horror arises out of the blue. This year, there was one suicide, in April. Another schoolboy quarreled with his parents, got drunk, and in the morning was already swinging from a tree. Maybe by the end of the year, someone else will cut themselves in this forest belt. Black Hand. I have an older sister. She is now 34 years old. She's been a little crazy since childhood. She seriously considers herself either a witch or a psychic. She is obsessed with all sorts of amulets, spells, potions, etc. I've never taken this hobby of hers particularly seriously, although I've taken quite a liking to some of her stories. I'll try in the thread gradually tell all of her stories that I remember. So, my sister and I have this mutual meme. Say hello to the Black Hand, which means suddenly shit myself. Like, yesterday, I was lying in the bath and suddenly the lights went out. It was dark. That's when I said hello to the Black Hand. I came home from the store. I realized that I had been shortchanged by 100 rubles and said hello to the Black Hand, etc. The origin of the meme comes from one of my sister's jokes, which she told me when I was a complete asshole, studying in the 1st or 2nd grade, M class. I don't know. Maybe she came up with all this, but I really freaked out then. In general, it was the mid-90s. My sister was a typical redneck teenager, and with her girlfriends, lived in huts without parents. At that time, we fit into the house in the private sector of some guy from a parallel class. Listened to the tape recorder, watched the videotape. The guys and some girls drank beer, but my sister did not drink then. We sat until late. My sister wanted to go to the toilet, but it was already quite dark on the street. She was afraid to go out alone. She has generally longed for the dark since childhood, and persuaded her classmate to accompany her. There was also a German shepherd in the yard, but she was on a leash. Naturally, the dog was extremely hostile towards strangers in the yard, and began barking fiercely and tugging at the chain, which made my sister become even more anxious. In short, both girls quickly went to the toilet in the back of the yard. The sister went there, leaving her friend outside to be afraid of the angry dog. While the sister was doing her business, they talked through the door with a friend about everything. Then the friend suddenly laughed and said that there were guys hiding behind the fence and wanted to scare them. The fence was very close to the toilet and was quite full of holes. The boards were falling off. After that, my friend went to the fence to burn the jokers, and she screamed. Out of fright, my sister almost fell on her ass. A couple of seconds later, my friend, without ceasing to scream like a siren, ran back into the house. That's when my sister felt mega sucked, because there was clearly some kind of commotion at the fence, and she was left alone in the dark next to this place. In general, my sister also quickly jumped out of the toilet and ran into the house. What's strange is that the shepherd stopped reacting to both her screaming girlfriend and her sister. She stopped barking and instantly climbed into her kennel, although before that, from the moment the girls left the veranda, she had been loudly and non-stop expressing furious hatred. At the house, the hysterical friend was given tea, calmed down, and asked what had happened. She replied that she saw someone's silhouette behind the fence where the board had fallen, thought that these were their guys, and decided to scare them away themselves. She quietly walked to the fence and stood next to the hole so that in case of any activity, she would immediately burn the jokers. A couple of seconds later, someone's hand came out of the hole, so she grabbed it, but it turned out that it was not a human hand. It was all covered with coarse black fur. The hand began to forcefully pull her friend towards her, and for the first time she pulled so hard that the girl tore the sleeve of her blouse on the edge of the fence board. Well, she started yelling and resisting, thinking that the hand was going to drag her the fuck away into the forest. Then she somehow freed herself, or the hand itself let go, and ran into the house. My sister said that after the story, the whole company came out with flashlights and looked at the fence. There, next to the hole, one of the boards was indeed very loose and was generally cracked lengthwise. Barak. My maternal grandfather told me the story. he is no longer alive. He died in 2011. In the 60s, he was involved in a large construction project. They cut down the forest on the southern tip of the city and built a new block there of Khrushchev houses, the same dull grey boxes that I spoke about. Now this block is called the 101st. For construction workers who came in large numbers from another city, and those who did not want to leave their workplace, barracks were built. Grandfather also spent the night in these barracks, although he could have gone home, but he enjoyed the atmosphere of the construction site, alcohol drinks with men in the evenings, playing cards and all that. At first everything was fine, and then 2 drinking buddies from his barracks disappeared somewhere. In the evening, they went to bed with everyone else, and in the morning they were not there, although all their junk remained. Well, at first everyone gave a damn, but when a couple of days passed and these comrades still did not show up to at least get their trousers and documents, the foreman turned to the cops. They seemed to be investigating something, interrogating the builders, but they were unable to find out anything. Grandfather was also asked, but he was not closely acquainted with the missing people and had no idea where they could have gone. And by the fall, one night the grandfather, greeted by the Black Hand. It was already cold there. The construction stopped. Everyone got their salaries and were fucked. My grandfather was one of the last ones there. He had some quarrels with the bosses. His friends were cheated on their pay. They didn't give work days, and he harnessed them for them. Kind of like a witness that they were really working at the construction site. In general, only 2 people remained in the barracks, the grandfather and some other builder unfamiliar to him. In shifts, they got up once a night to throw firewood into the potbelly stove. Well, grandfather got up on his turn, lit a fire, and lay down again. Only he could not sleep. He tossed and turned on the trestle bed for a whole hour, but could not sleep, and then he hears something scratching under the trestle bed, like a cat or a mouse. But there were no animals in the barracks. Grandfather looks under the trestle bed. Nothing. He lay down again, scratched again. He looks again, shines a flashlight. Again nothing. Grandfather went outside to take a piss, came back and lay down. He had just begun to doze off when someone tried to pull him off the couch by the leg. Grandfather went nuts, jumped up, inspected the entire barracks. It was empty. The potbelly stove was burning. The neighbor in the barracks was sleeping peacefully in the far corner. Grandfather went back to bed. He died, of course, but he didn't really scream. He is an atheist communist materialist, that's all. Even when he told me this cool story, he constantly emphasized his non-serious attitude towards what was happening, said that everything could, of course, be a dream, and because of a short circuit in the brain, he mistook the events of the dream for reality and joked. In general, my grandfather was unable to sleep well that night. As soon as he fell asleep, an invisible dick pulled him by the leg. Once he even fell off the trestle bed. In the morning I got used to it, woke up, picked up my leg, rolled over to the other side, and then went to sleep. In the morning, when it was already light, he woke up again, but because he was being dragged by the leg, and again he heard some kind of fuss under the trestle bed. I waited for a bit, thinking that now everything would calm down, but no way. Then he turned over on the couch and looked down to look under the bed again, and that's when he laid a ton of bricks. The blonde head of one of those same hard workers who disappeared in the summer stuck out from under the trestle bed and looked at him with curiosity. The grandfather ran out onto the street at jet speed and took a long time to come to his senses. When I returned back to the barracks, naturally, there was no builder under the trestle bed. After that, he no longer spent the night in the barracks. Those missing, by the way, were never found, and if they were found, then grandfather did not know about it. Visiting a friend. So, it's time for the first awesome story from the life of OP. As I already wrote, the cases that happened to me personally are rather not creepy, but simply strange. I usually understood their strangeness in hindsight. I think I was 13 or maybe 14. A friend had a PlayStation, and after school I went to his place to play. He liked to fight with me in MK3, and I was more pleased with the first Silent Hill that he had. The translation was kind of fucked up, with Russian dubbing in the monotonous voice of Down, but I liked running around the 3D city and killing polygonal hecks more than doing fatalities. A friend, by the way, had all the combinations written down on a piece of notebook paper that always lay next to the prefix. In general, I ran into him after lunch. My friend was home alone. My parents were at work. We watched a new episode of Pokemon on ORT. I think it was shown at about 3 o'clock every day, and started playing PlayStation. About half an hour later, my friend went to the store. I don't remember why. Either he remembered that my mother told me to buy something there for dinner, or we decided to buy soda and chocolate. Well, I was left alone, switched to my favorite Silent Hill, and started playing while he was gone. And there some fucking chick enters the room. I had never seen her before in my life. I was very surprised because I thought that there was no one there in the apartment. However, it was a 3-room apartment. Someone could have been sleeping in the bedroom all this time, but why didn't my friend tell me about it then? The chick looked ordinary, about 25 to 30 years old, with long hair, wearing home clothes, like a plain blouse and jeans. Well, I said hello to her. I'm my mother's polite boy. She said hello and asked where my friend was. I replied that he went to the store, but then she made me terribly angry, pointing out that I had thrown a chewing gum wrapper on the floor and told me to quickly pick it up and not litter. I hated and still hate when strangers with arrogant faces start making all sorts of comments to me. But what can I do? I'm in a miraculous house. I got agitated, but I picked up the candy wrapper and put it in my pocket. She then went to the window and started looking at something downstairs, 3rd floor. I even managed to check out her ass, covered in jeans, lol. Teenage hormones. Then she said something else, insignificant to me. I forgot what exactly it was, but it was something very ordinary, and left the room. I continued playing. After a while, my friend returned. I opened the door for him, and as soon as he crossed the threshold of the apartment, I asked him what kind of chick lived here, and why he didn't tell me about her. The friend was extremely surprised, and said that he was alone in the apartment. I didn't believe it, because I myself had just talked to the moralizing girl. We went around all the rooms, even looked in the closet. No one was there. This is where I freaked out. The assumption that it could be some random person who entered the apartment during the friend's absence was dismissed immediately, because the friend's paranoid parents instilled in their son the idea from the cradle that it was impossible to leave the apartment door unlocked, even for a second, and therefore he forced, when I go to the store, that I lock the door behind him from inside after he leaves, and open it when he arrives. There was also a version that the girl was a relative. She knew the friend by name, and had her own keys, but, I didn't hear, so I swear by Allah and Buddha that the apartment door didn't open during the friend's absence, and the audibility in the apartment is excellent, and the sound of toys was not so loud. And B, I described the girl to my friend in quite detail, and the description did not coincide with any of the relatives that he knew. Then he told this incident to his parents, and they also told him, but they did not have such a relative. In short, I was then left extremely puzzled by the crap that was happening. A week later, a friend was hit by a car. I'm kidding, of course, although it would be at least somewhat logical, like, death came for him, but didn't find him at home, so took it after a week. But my friend is still alive, though he moved to St. Petersburg, and I haven't had contact with him for a long time. Faces. Another cool story from my sister. After school, she studied in St. Petersburg. In general, half of our graduates go to St. Petersburg. I'm the only autistic Hicken who preferred to receive education in my native city so as to not be far from my mother's house. And if in adolescence her focus on schizoterism was not so strongly expressed, then in St. Petersburg she found a company of people who had gone like herself, and that's when it all started going full blast. As a result, after college, she still couldn't find a place for herself and returned to her native land. But her stories about the St. Petersburg Vanabi occultists made me go crazy. For example, there, some dick suggested to her that for the next ritual to summon the hell demon, he must give 30 lashes to her wrists, but she doesn't mind, in general. Then the sister wore blouses with long sleeves for a long time, and the demons never appeared, but this did not bother my sister. Well, Some people just have bad brains with no chance of straightening them out. I was convinced of this example of my sister. To the point, there in their circle of witches and sorceresses, there was one girl, either Tanya or Galia, I don't remember exactly. So this Tanya, let's use that name, was a notorious drug addict. My sister doesn't know what exactly she was sitting on because she doesn't understand this shit. Tanya's trick was that for some time now, she had been constantly telling everyone that she saw faces on literally any surface. Anons, have you ever seen pictures from this category? Wooden chairs and such with patterns that look like faces. Here is something similar, only this Tanya saw the face even on a completely smooth surface, without protrusions or patterns. My sister told me one day how they were going down the subway, and a friend saw a face right on the smooth wall near the escalator and began broadcasting to her the speech of this non-existent face. You say, what a stupid idiot, what's the big deal? And the fact is that, according to my sister, who is also pretty crazy, so I personally don't believe her words 100%. In general, the messages that those faces conveyed to this chick were, as a rule, very true. For example, one day she saw a face on the back of a seat in a movie theater that told her something like, the car is moving, and on the way to the dorm, her friend was almost hit by a taxi when she was walking through an intersection and barely had time to stagger back. Another time, the chick's face, which grew up on the blackboard at the university, told her that she would soon feel bad, and a day later, her friend rushed to the hospital with allergic edema. My sister told me about other cases, but I'm too lazy to write them all down now. There was a prediction about an attack by stray dogs, about cheating at the cash register and all that. Everything came true. But according to a friend, more often the faces were talking crap, rather than making predictions. The most shocking story I remember was when the woman who went there saw a face on her own knee, and it told her that her eyes would turn into ink. Don't ask what this means. I was in awe when I heard this. The sister says that during her stay in St. Petersburg, her friend remained alive and physically healthy, but her mental state deteriorated greatly. I don't know. Maybe she really was a banal schizophrenic. Lake outside my city. Don't be so fussy, Anon. I don't always have the time and energy to throw you another pasta. Yes, I created the thread when I was drunk, and the sea was knee-deep, so cool stories every day. I was clearly borscht, but I will continue my commitments as best as I can. Not far from our city, at the 4th kilometer along the highway, there is a lake with a stream, where in the summer, those who do not enjoy the city beach, river flow, and cold water clogged with factory waste like to go swimming. This is a popular place for parents with small back eaters because the lake deepens quite smoothly, without cliffs, so there is little chance of your kids accidentally drowning while swimming, and the DNIWE there is pleasant for swimming. Not muddy, but sandy. I splashed there myself a couple of times when I was in school, but now I don't really like swimming. I don't remember the last time I went to the beach. Even as a child, boys at school told me this creepypasta, and then I heard it from adults. Most likely, this is just an urban legend because the details are different every time, and there is no proof that it actually happened. But many believe. My redneck brothers and sister, for example, are 100% sure of the veracity of the story. If you don't get fooled by the details that change from time to time, the essence of the story is that in the mid-80s, at the end of the summer, on a rare clear sunny day for our region, a group of young people went on a picnic near this lake. We took with us a grill, meat, a beer, rackets, and a badminton ball, a battery-powered tape recorder. In general, we were going to have a cultural rest. We arrived at the place in our Muscovite and were glad that there were no children who would ruin the lamp-like atmosphere of the holiday. In general, we settled down, splashed around, started barbecuing, turned on the music. Everything went according to plan. At some point, one of the hikers drew the attention of her friends to the fact that on the opposite side of the lake, a company of 4 people came out of the forest and also headed to the shore. Here I will clarify that our lake is narrow but long, and the most normal swimming beach is located at one of its ends, located close to the dirt road. So from this point, the opposite shore was quite far away, and the vacationers did not see detailed details of the appearances of these 4 people. It seemed like 2 of them were short, like children, and the other two were taller. At first they didn't pay attention. They don't have a monopoly on the lake, especially since the new group seemed to have decided to position themselves further away from them so as not to disturb each other. The only thing that was a little puzzling was how the hell these four came out of the forest from the side where there was no road. About 10 minutes passed, and the young people noticed another oddity in the behavior of the new arrivals. Firstly, they were located near the shore in the most inconvenient place for swimming, where there was no sand, but only grass and bushes. And at the bottom there, the sand was mixed with soil, so instead of swimming norms, they were covered with mud. Secondly, they didn't do anything there. They just fucking sat down. Well, they sat motionless, and that's it. In one version, they looked towards the youth. In another, they sat in a circle and stared at each other. The chicks slowly began to feel goosebumps on their skin. The boys weren't really bothered yet. They were still outnumbered, and if something happened, they could overwhelm their opponents with numbers. And then all four simultaneously rose and climbed into the water. They didn't take off their clothes or anything. They stupidly entered the water, either began to walk along the bottom or swim forward until everyone disappeared under the water. The boys and girls watching them waited in awe for them to swim out, but they never did. By the way, they usually add that there were no ripples in the lake when they entered the water. The surface remained smooth. Here on the opposite bank, everyone has already shit themselves, including the brave souls. We quietly packed up our belongings and headed back to the city. Usually, at the end of a cool story, it is thoughtfully stated that, as it later turned out, just 4 people had drowned in this lake up to that moment. 2 of them were children, but without proof. It just looks like a beautiful invention for extra hype. Factory history. By the way, I just wrote Dream, and I remembered another story. There is a crypto without the paranormal, connected with a chemical plant. It seems like it actually happened. This happened in 1996. In general, the next scheduled audit at the plant revealed a major shortage of a certain chemical reagent that was used in the production there. Well, there the control department began to monitor the workers, this and that, and in the end it turned out that a truck arrives at night. A couple of Bespalev's workers take out several barrels of this reagent from the warehouse. The storekeeper and the watchman ended up in the share, load it onto the car, and it drives off. Moreover, this was led by the local shop manager, about whom everyone knew that he was connected with a local organized crime group that engaged in commercial racketeering. The shop turned to the cops. They tracked the route of the truck. It was heading straight to the dacha of one of the leaders of the organized crime group, surrounded by a high fence, with an alarm system, guards, and shepherd dogs inside. In short, you can't get in. After a while, the truck drove out and dumped other, larger barrels into the river. They organized an operation, and during the next drain, they secretly scooped up some water from the place where the drain was made, until the contents of the barrels had time to completely dissipate. The examination found the same reagent, mixed with various organic substances. In general, the cops immediately understood everything, but the organized crime group was then really influential, and for another 1.5 years, they still could not bust them, despite all the evidence. And not only related to this investigation, there were a lot of cases related to this organized crime group and more. When the shop was eventually closed down, during interrogation, as expected, the bandits unanimously admitted that the bodies of those who were kidnapped and killed at the dacha were dissolved in the reagent, which was essentially a strong acid as a convenient way to get rid of the body. In before Walter White himself went crazy when he watched Breaking Bad, about 20 people were dissolved like this.